So the first thing and the most important thing is to make sure that you're following the person's specification. So Hello everyone, my name is Aika and my channel is dedicated to anyone interested in psychology or mental health, and today I'll be talking about how to get an assistant psychologist post from start to finish. So what does an assistant psychologist do? This really varies based on the actual job role in that service. So some assistant psychologists might find themselves doing a lot of assessments, treatments and triages. Other assistant psychologists might find themselves doing a lot of research, audits, or other kind of administrative roles. So it is a very varied kind of role, and it really depends on the demands of the service. Assistant psychologist posts are seen often as a gold standard simply because of the exposure you get underneath a clinical psychologist. Sometimes it might not be a clinical psychologist, it might be a health psychologist, a forensic psychologist. Either way, you are exposed to the way they think, what they do, also kind of supervision with them. So it's a really, really good way to kind of get a taster of what kind of work a clinical psychologist does. That said, assistant psychologist posts are extremely hard to get. So whilst before it used to be a gold standard job to get in order to get onto the doctorate, nowadays it's more seen as the gold dust job because it's so rare and so competitive and almost impossible to get on. I actually feel like sometimes that assistant psychologist posts are harder to get onto than getting onto the doctorate course. Just a short story to illustrate my point around how sometimes assistant psychologist posts might be harder to get than to get onto the doctorate. There was one time that I was applying to a forensic assistant psychologist post in the community. In the interview room, I bumped into a girl that we later noticed that we actually knew each other from a party, and we had actually a mutual friend. So we stayed in contact to see whether each of us got onto the AP post that we were interested in. And neither of us got the AP post, but both of us got onto the doctorate, which is very curious. But yeah, this stuff happens a lot, and I genuinely feel like if I apply to an assistant psychologist post now, even if I have an offer for the doctorate, I would not be able to compete with some of the people out there.
Yes, I'm just a lucky so-and-so.
This video will be separated into 4 parts. The first part is how to search for an assistant psychologist job. The second part will be looking at the application process. The third part will be how to prepare for an assistant psychologist job interview. And the fourth part will be, again, some personal tips that I find useful. Part 1, how to search for an assistant psychologist job. There are a lot of different websites that you can use to find assistant psychologist jobs, but over time I found that there's only one that you really need, which is the NHS Jobs website. The reason why that I think that this website is the best is because I know that most NHS services will be posting on that website. Number 2, they also have an email alert option. So it means that when a job does get posted, it will be sent to your email. The reason why this is extremely beneficial is because finding assistant psychologist job is a race more than it is a competition. So actually these job posts closes usually after 50 applications. So you really want to be the first one to be applying, or one of the first ones to apply. Just a quick tip before we move on to the next section. Initially, when I graduated from a master's, I was quite picky with the assistant psychologist jobs that I was choosing, but I quickly noticed that that is not the right way to go. Actually, it's a numbers game in the beginning. So a lot of assistant psychologists probably will agree with me with this point, especially for your first post. Right, on to the next section, which is the application process. Most of the application process is quite self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go in depth into that. What I'm going to do is basically give you some tips around how to make sure that your supporting statement reflects the best that is within you. So the first thing and the most important thing is to make sure that you're following the person's specification. So So this is a document that they share alongside the job description, and there are a list of essential criteria and also a list of desirable criteria. You want to make sure that you're hitting all the essential, but also make sure that you're really mentioning some of the desirables as well. A really good way to tailor your application to the person's specification is, in the beginning, write 3 reasons why you are suitable for this post and try to tailor that to the person's specification or the job description. Now, this will guide them or give them a shortcut to understanding who you are and why you stand out from other applicants. Another really simple way to make sure that you are tailoring to the person's specification is basically rephrasing the person's specification point as the beginning of your sentence, and then writing out why you meet that standard. Another tip is not to dumb down your experiences. So for example, if you're applying to a neuropsychology post and you don't actually have any neuropsychology experience, that's totally fine. I've gotten an interview in a neuropsychology service without having any experience before. What you want to do, however, is to make sure that you stretch your experience. That if you had any kind of experience learning about neuropsychology or neuroscience in your undergrad, write about that. If, let's say, you have been doing some autism research in university and you're applying for an autism post, write about that as well. So make sure that you're stretching. Even if it's like a 3-month experience, it's sometimes more than enough to, get your foot in the door. What you don't want to do is to list experiences and not look at the person's specification, simply because they can see through it right away. They can see that this person has just clicked on the button and just sent the application and didn't have a look at what they do, what they're interested in, what their focus is on. Final tip is about speed. Now, this is a very weird tip to give, but ultimately it really is about speed. I have a little story here. So I was working in a forensic PD service and I was looking at different kinds of jobs just to vary my experience a little bit. Our clinical supervisor was really supportive of it. So she actually found a job that her ex-assistant psychologist was leaving because she was going on to the doctorate, and she basically sent it to me at, I think, 8:50 a.m. So I was like on the DLR, I was like looking at this job that I was really interested in. I was really excited. I was going to go into work and immediately start on the application. By the time that I got to the hospital, which is like around like 9 a.m. or 9:10 a.m., the post was closed. So the really important thing is to be quick. And a way to be quick is to have templates ready. Templates that you tailor afterwards. Don't just send it over. But let's say you've applied to eating disorder, you've applied to a psychosis service, you applied to a neuropsychology service, put them in folders and then whip them out, copy and paste, and just tailor it a little bit and send it out. Unfortunately, it's just the way to play the game in the way that it's been structured. But there are a few Facebook groups, specifically the one on Assistant Psychologist or the doctorate one, which will be quite helpful to search specific terms to see what people are saying about different kinds of services and to get some ideas to Google what things you might need to know prior to writing the application or building your template. Okay, right. So now comes the scary bit. You've done all your applications, you've been rejected 90 times, you got that one interview. Now what are you going to do? Freak out? No. Same advice as I would use in my previous tip, which is to just search it up on one of the 2 pages that I suggested. What I've always found really useful that I've used in my Cambridge interviews and then in my Oxford interviews is to basically write a huge list of things that they might ask. Not huge, but like enough to cover your bases, and basically record yourself asking it on the computer and then ask yourself back. It helps to simulate the interview environment. You have no idea how nerve-wracking it is to even look at your own face asking yourself a question. In addition to that, you're recording yourself. So again, that level of self-consciousness is a really kind of good way to give yourself a mock interview if you don't have someone to kind of do it for you. Another tip to prepare for interviews is to walk around and just talk to yourself. This sounds really weird, but it really helps for you to link all the knowledge that you have, to link it to the mouth, and making sure that it's as concise as possible. Because a lot of times when we're preparing for interviews, we are trying to read, we're trying to write, we're trying to, collate everything together, but we never practice the speaking bit. Now, I can't get into kind of disorder or clinical population specific tips because there's just too many and I'm not actually competent in all of them. So 3 things. Look at theories around that clinical population, look at the kind of assessment techniques or assessment protocols that are often used in these services, and practice reflecting, so reflecting on experiences. Usually people are kind of stuck on what questions to ask the interviewers. Now, usually I tend to ask how the job looks like, how much research opportunities are you allowed to have, what does, I guess, the day-to-day work look like. So is it admin-y, or is it more assessments or more treatment focus? And how many kind of things can an assistant psychologist be involved with. So, well done for getting to this point into the video. Now you get some personal tips from myself and some tea. There's actually a lot of tea around AP posts because there's so many opinions around AP posts and how problematic it is, and I can literally talk for hours about it. Number 1 tip, and I've already talked about this for the whole video basically, it's a time race. It's extremely competitive because people are just sending out applications within seconds, and they can be kind of like dummy applications, if you get me. They're just sending as I recommended against. So this fills up quite a lot of the 50 spaces that they start cutting off for. So it's really a speedy race, and it shouldn't really be like that, but there is really no choice because the services don't have like a million years to read through AP applications. Once the AP post or the job post is out in the wild, because it's honestly will just go. If you wait from morning, if you start work at 9, you want to be like, oh, I want to write it after work, it's gone. When I was an assistant psychologist in my previous job, the HR team forgot to close the post after 50 applications, so they left it out for a day or maybe 2 days, maybe maximum 2.5 days, and we ended up with around 150 or 175 applications for one post, and this post was a band 4 post. So that hopefully spells out how important it is to get your applications in quick. The reason why I think this is tea is because it's so problematic, because the first 50 applications, if it just goes out after an hour, a lot of them will be kind of dummy ones, wouldn't they? And some people just don't have that opportunity to be so on it. So for example, a lot of clinical support workers that I worked with, they struggle with that because they have to be on the ward, and on wards you don't have access to phones, you don't have access to your own computer. How on earth are you going to know that these assistant psychologist posts are out? But it is a massive issue that really blocks a lot of people from getting the jobs that they really deserve. Right, second piece of tea. It's an unequal race. So what I mean by unequal race is that some posts are being posted out, but in the kind of manager or the psychologist's mind, they really know who they're going to hire, because there's these things called honorary assistant psychologists. So I'm not saying that it's unfair for an honorary to get the AP post. Extremely well deserved, they worked hard, etc. But I'm just thinking all the time about people who can't afford doing honorary work. Sometimes these honorary posts are like 3 days a week. Like, who can survive on that, and especially in London? So these posts are often reserved for honorary people. They post it out just for the formality of it. So whilst they're very, very good quality candidates, they might just end up with someone that they already know, that they already trust, that they already have a relationship with, that know exactly what the job role entails because they're already doing it. And I say this from experience from talking to a lead psychologist or a consultant psychologist. He says that they have like 5 to 6 honorary assistant psychologists, and the consultant tells the honorary assistant psychologist that the job post will be out at, let's say, 7 a.m. today, and immediately they know exactly when, and they already have their applications ready. Like, how are you going to compete with that? Yeah, so just be prepared and don't take it personally if you don't get the job. There's nothing wrong with you. It's extremely competitive. There's very few posts. The posts that people do get, you're either competing with other assistant psychologists that's already been assistant psychologists, people who already know what they're doing. Another thing is the honorary thing, which is, I don't know, there are some issues around that. You're also competing against people who have worked in the service. So as clinical support workers, that have loads of experience, maybe 8 months of experience with that clinical population. So if you're straight out of uni and you're just trying your luck, you're competing with a huge pool with big fish. So tip here is either have lots of money and be able to live rent-free and be an honorary assistant psychologist for a while. That's the best way that you can guarantee an assistant psychologist post. Or get your foot in the door in other ways by being a clinical support worker, which for some people feels like a step backwards, or I guess, it's not the most glamorous job if you've gotten like a really good grade in psychology in your bachelor's and you got like a master's, and then to go become a support worker. But at the same time, you're not going backwards, okay? Clinical support worker roles are hard, but you get so much valuable experience from it. A lot of people do look back and think that the support worker times were the times where they learned the most and had the most interaction with clients. It's a numbers game, it's a race, a time race, and it's an unequal race. And keep these in mind when you get rejected. It's just the necessary process that I think everyone who's been a clinical psychologist or becoming a clinical psychologist, they've had the same exact struggle. All of these kind of job experiences I can talk in a different video. Final tip, pretty generic tip, but is to get feedback. So if you manage for some magical reason to get an interview, well done, but get feedback. So it's super rare to get interviews anyways, so you better juice that stuff. I was about to swear. Juice it, ask for your feedback, work on that feedback, and try again and try again and try again. Trust me, the process will just make you develop such thick skin that by the end of it you're just like, meh, another rejection, So we've come to the end of the video now. I hope you enjoyed this video as well and you found it helpful in any sort of way. I know it's quite generic advice, but it's really hard to get quite specific because of the varied nature of assistant psychologist role. And hopefully the second part was quite enjoyable. But if you enjoy these videos, then please subscribe, follow my Instagram, comment down below what you want next. I'll have a few videos already requested for the next week or so, but I'm always writing ideas down. So see you next time.
A home where love waits, I know.